Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Weaver. Welcome to the Audio Analyst. Pardon me. Today, in my third conversation with the remarkable Andrew Jones, he takes us back through his time at Infinity, Pioneer, and TAD, a period encompassing 2 decades from 1994 through 2014. Now, we cover a lot of ground in this episode, and I'm sorry to say that given the immensity of the timescale, there was just no way to cover it exhaustively. But Andrew filled in a lot of the history, and we talk about many of the more memorable accomplishments over that period. And you'll get to see some of my own photos of some of these events. And further, for those who may be interested, I've included links to the 2 of my CES reports that figure prominently in our discussions, both CES 2003 and 2008. Now, this was an especially fertile period for Andrew. It was a time that, among other pursuits, allowed him to advance the development of the concentric driver designs that he had striven to improve upon since their introduction at KEF in the mid-1980s. He pioneered using self-amplified woofers in his designs, first with the Infinity Prelude in the mid-1990s, then with the Pioneer TZ-F700, a pair of speakers that I sold and loved. His designs at every level, from an amazingly musical sub-$100 pair of Pioneers to the spectacular $42,000 stand-mounted compact reference 1 monitors, as well as the staggeringly transparent and immediate $80,000 reference 1 floor standers for Technical Audio Devices Laboratories. Once again, guys, he covers a lot of ground here and shares some remarkably interesting and entertaining stories. So let's not waste any more time.
Welcome, everyone. We're back again with the inimitable Andrew Jones. We did the first episode on his early days and his education and his college, his university, and we did the second episode on the KEF time, and that moves us into 1994. And today we're going to pick up with Andrew when he moved to Infinity in the United States. And Andrew, was that your first move to the United States? I mean, you had been. Are you currently an American citizen? Are you by citizenship? Do you have? How does that work?
I'm still a British citizen.
Okay.
Never taken citizenship over here.
All right. Now, Laurie Fincham, when KEF was purchased, and it was clear that the writing was on the wall that they weren't concerned, in my estimation, they weren't as concerned with the pure research and everything. They were trying to basically consolidate what Celestion knew with what you guys knew and make it all one consolidated company. Laurie got the offer to come to Infinity, and I guess you followed him to Infinity. Is that correct?
Yes, I wouldn't say. I think KEF were directionless a bit, rudderless, let's say, in that transition. And so Laurie had been made an offer by Floyd Toole to come over to the States and work for Harman.
Really great work he did, yeah.
And of course, Harman owned Infinity. And so he moved out. At the same time, he'd made me an offer to come, but I was a bit more reticent about a move. Partly I wanted to see, well, what will happen within KEF. But the other was that it's a big change.
Yeah.
And, I'm not sure I want to leave England. It's bad enough thinking about working for a new company, but also changing countries is a big thing. So
sure.
I thought, let him go and be the advanced guard and see what it's like. And if within a year
he was like, go ahead, come on over, it's okay.
Yeah. Oh no, don't come. I made a bad move. So
no.
So
now was Infinity was under the Harman umbrella at that point.
Yes. Yes.
And so, as I recall, Sidney Harmon, believe it or not, he sold Infinity to a food company when he went to work for the Carter administration. And then when he left that administration, I can't remember what food company it was right now. It escapes me. But then when he left that administration, he bought it back.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it was Infinity or that it was Harman. It's more likely
It was Harman
Harman.
International, I believe.
Harman International, yes. And sold it back at a good price.
Yeah.
You want to, I guess that's a trick in big business. Find a buyer who doesn't know what they're doing, get a good price for it, let them run it into the ground and buy it back. And
buy it back for half of what you sold it for, yeah.
So, so
This was 94-ish, yes?
94 that I moved out. So it's actually an interesting story with that because, I've been approached, a year earlier. So that whole next year, through 93, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do.
Sure.
And eventually I thought, yeah, I'm probably going to do this. But I actually let the new management at KEF know that I'd been approached. I didn't say about what, but I let them know I'd been approached, but this would be to move to the States. And it was a big decision for me. So I said, I haven't accepted it, but I want you to know I've been made an offer that I'm considering. And I'm not telling you to kind of say, give me more money to stay, because that's not how I work. It's that if I'm going to take it, you're going to need time to find a replacement because we're in the middle of all these projects and I don't want to make it difficult. So I'm giving you plenty.
It's a remarkably fair thing for you to do.
And so I let them know towards the end of 93, but they keep coming periodically. So can you tell us, are you going to take this job? We kind of need to know. And I said, okay, look, here's the deal. I said, give me over Christmas and New Year to actually make the decision. And I promise as soon as we get back in the new year, I will.
You'll have my answer.
You'll have my answer. So,
And I suspect, excuse me for interrupting, I apologize, but I suspect this wasn't about money. I suspect this was about how self-esteem and enjoyment and what you wanted to be doing. So
yeah, and career opportunity. In fact, Kevin Lowe, who was one of the brothers who was the owners, he said, from a business point of view, I want you to stay. As a friend, you should go.
You should go.
Because of the opportunity for you. Right. So finally, I came in the new year, and so January 2nd, 3rd, whatever it was when we returned in the new year of 94. Unfortunately, everybody had gone off to CES, so there was no one to tell. So I had to wait, and it was January 17th when they all came back. So, so I went in to the office to Kevin, and I said, "Okay, I've made my decision. I'm sorry, but I'm going to take this job in the US." So, to anyone in Los Angeles, January the 17th, 1994 has got a particular memory, because this was 10 o'clock in the morning when UK time, I resigned. And about 12:30, midday-ish, which was 4:30 in the morning California time.
6 hours, well, 6, 8 hours.
8 hours, Northridge earthquake.
Oh my God!
I just resigned 2 hours before the earthquake hits Northridge, which is where JBL is and close to where Infinity is.
Yeah.
And everybody comes rushing down. Have you heard the news? Turn on the news, turn on the news. And there's images of bridges collapsed, gas mains exploding, and I've just resigned.
How remarkable.
And so they said, you don't have to go. We'll happily tear up your resignation and you can stay. But I said, by the time I get out there, it's probably going to be okay. And it was. In fact, my contract stated that I needed to give 3 months notice. I wasn't going to be moving out until March, April time. And they asked if we could have 6 months. I said, no, you can't have 6 months. But I said, here's the deal. And I worked this out with Laurie. because I've got to apply for a visa to be able to go and work there,
Sure.
and it's not guaranteed, my contract said, we will guarantee you a year's work of consultancy if the visa doesn't come through, to give you a chance to find something else if you have to. If the visa comes
Pretty
through,
damn reasonable, actually.
yeah. And I said, well, look, they're also asking me if I can give a bit longer time. So how about I consult to both? I continue working on my KEF projects because they're winding down. We're getting towards the end. And
Right.
I'll start working on the projects for Infinity. And once the visa comes through, I'm gone and I cut off KEF. So that's what we did. So it worked
reasonable
out
of you,
well.
I think.
I thought so.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, seriously. It was.
So we started working, Laurie and I, working on a concept for a speaker while I was still in England. So I'd be working on that from my home. And
What
then,
speaker was that?
aha, so that was the Infinity Prelude. We started working on this concept that could we build a high efficiency speaker? How would we do that? And since we knew that it's bass that kills your efficiency, what if we do an integral powered bass speaker? So we put an amplifier inside, we run it at speaker level, and so the wires that come from your amplifier connect to the crossovers that power this ended up being a four-way system. It goes to the passive crossovers for the mid-bass, the mid-bass, the mid-range, and the tweeter.
Yeah.
And also goes down to the amplifier. So we attenuate it to compensate for the gain of the amplifier.
Right.
So now it's as though, although it's an active crossover in there and enough power to power and equalize this bass driver, as far as anything else knows, the amplifier doesn't exist. It's plugged into the wall, but it's a transparent process. All the crossovers, be a mix of active and passive, transparent to the user. There's no real controls on there. You don't have to match the subwoofer to the tower part because I've already done it. Because it always occurred to me that when we as system designers hand over the job of, well, we'll design you a subwoofer. And my job is to integrate all the drivers seamlessly, so you're not aware of the transitions.
Correct.
And yet with subwoofers, we go, you have a go. You see how difficult this is. We'll give you all the controls. See how many days or weeks.
Oh, shit.
Right? And you never really get it perfectly right.
Well, yeah.
Or ish, right? So it's very difficult, let's say. So I'll do that job for you. So what we developed was an aluminum tube. See, I've switched to aluminum now because I'm talking about
not aluminum anymore. Yes.
Right?
Gotcha.
So aluminum
You're an
tube.
American guy now.
Yeah, extruded tube and 4 mid-bass woofers, 2 mid-range, and a tweeter, all in sort of this column about that diameter and about 4 or more feet tall.
I was going to say it was about 4. I thought it was closer to 5 feet, but yeah.
Well, the column would be 4 foot. Then you got the bass system on the bottom, and the bass was a side-firing 12-inch woofer with a 300-watt amplifier, and all EQ'd and whatever.
Now they built the amplifier in house, or
yes, we did.
Buy it from somebody else?
No, we designed it. Designed in house.
It was Class AB.
Class AB, yes.
Yeah.
So a heatsink on the back, and it looked quite cool, and it was 96 dB sensitivity, and also an almost flat impedance curve, except at the bass end, because you don't want to have to dissipate amplifier power into the power amplifier. So the impedance rose at the base, but otherwise it was a combination of getting the crossover slopes right and a bit of conjugation, but it's essentially a pretty flat.
But it was a conjugated kind of crossover, yes?
Yeah, So it worked really well. And waveguide on the tweeter because
I never heard it. I saw pictures, but I
uh,
never heard it. I'm sorry to
yeah.
say.
So
The
and as I
biggest
said,
Infinity fan in the mid-'90s. I apologize.
center channel to go with it and some
Oh,
surround
wow.
speakers, I think. So really cool. And then the next set of speakers. So that was started development while I was still in England. Then as soon as I moved out there by July, I think, I started in earnest, practically building things.
Sure.
So
Was this I mean, this was a change for you because you had been primarily research oriented, and
well,
now
no, I
you're
don't.
actually doing development for products. Yes.
Yeah, I had already crossed over to development at KEF.
Okay. Okay.
So the
I'm
1072
sorry.
was
That's
my
right.
first speaker that I developed in the reference
Okay.
series. So we got this built and launched it, and it was really good. And then we did a second series of speakers called Overture, where we expanded on the idea, and we built a bookshelf speaker, two mid-rangers, a tweeter in a kind of mirrored array. Side-firing 8-inch woofer with a 150 watt amplifier on the back. And this was 12 inches by 12 inches by about 4.5 inches. Very compact
Yeah.
box. But it was, again, it was 92 dB sensitivity for a bookshelf and went
Pretty
down to
decent.
40 hertz because, again, it had the amplifier built in. But this was a very interesting amplifier because we wanted to do something cost effective. And as an engineer, you've got to know the cost of all the components you're
Sure.
putting into a design and where to make the trade-offs. And in looking at the amplifier cost, we knew that the most expensive part, or one of the most expensive parts, is the power transformer. So, if you want 150 watts output from the amplifier, you need a power transformer that's at least 300 VA
300
because of
watts.
all the losses. So we were talking amongst ourselves and thinking, okay, what are the expensive parts? It's the power supply. It's the transformer and the capacitors. Why do we need a power transformer? What does it do for us? It steps down the voltage from 240 or 120.
In this country, 120, yeah.
Down to whatever the supply rails. So for a 100 watt amplifier, you need around 50 volt
50 volts.
supply rails. Somewhere around that. Is that all it really does? Well, no. It provides safety isolation from the wall. You've got to have a safe, a transformer that passes UL safety isolation. You can't just plug something into the wall because then you've got live parts, especially if you get the pins reversed, right? So we thought, but you can plug a hairdryer, which does not have a transformer in the bathroom.
Yeah, where there's water everywhere.
Right, and it has a safety certificate. Why? What's different? So we started thinking.
That's an interesting question.
We called a representative from UL to come and visit and started quizzing them. Why is one safe? Why is the other not? And we got all the answers to this, and we decided we don't need a power transformer. But since it does the two jobs, step down the voltage but provide safety isolation, if we can do safety isolation a different way, we've solved that problem. But also, we now have to work at line voltage. Well, 120 volt RMS, once you've rectified and smoothed it, is now 200 volts. So now our amplifier is running off 200 volt rails. So now we can't use regular impedance speakers. We have to wind high impedance coils. I forget what it was, 16 or 32 ohms, something like that. Well, okay, that's no big deal. We're designing our own drivers. Why don't we just design the voice coils to be high impedance? Instead of 8 ohms, it's 20 to 30 ohms.
Whatever you wanted them.
Well, that solves that problem. How do we make it safe? Well, if it's fully enclosed with grills and the cone is impervious and the surround is impervious, that's should be just as safe as a hairdryer is. But now we've got to connect an input to it. So now we're connecting directly to something that has live voltages capable on it. So we came up with a design for using a signal transformer as isolation.
Really?
But using a modem transformer. Now, a modem transformer normally operates at a few hundred hertz, not going down to 20 hertz. But we found a way with special trick circuitry, inspired by Peter Baxendale, to be able to make a modem transformer work down to below 20 hertz.
Wow.
And I would tell you, but I'd have to kill all the listeners here.
That's all right. That's all right. We don't want to die.
So that worked. And modem transformers are UL approved as standard. So we built this thing, saved the cost of the transformer, and
what kind of savings are we talking about, Andrew? I mean, what kind of? I mean,
10 to 20,
40%, 60%. What kind of savings?
At least 40% of the cost of the overall.
Good God, that's huge.
So this made it practical.
That's huge.
To do. And so that became the Overture, and then there was Overture 1 was the bookshelf, and then there were 2 tower speakers.
I do remember those.
In the lineup. So yeah, we're always doing. It's always, why are things done a certain way? And do you have to do them that way? And the answer is not always. And this was one prime example of solving problems for bass, but at the same time, solving problems of cost to give a better cost performance ratio.
I suspect it was I mean, the fact that you questioned it and resolved it that way, I don't know that you guys went into it looking to save money as much as you went into it looking to solve a problem, and you saved money.
Well, in a way, it was driven. We could have just put a regular amplifier in.
Sure.
We didn't get any performance advantage per se. What we got was a cost performance advantage.
Huge cost savings, yeah.
And it was a case of what are the expensive parts? And even the capacitors we made a saving on, because high voltage capacitors, the energy storage
they're much larger
in the capacitor. As the voltage goes up, the energy density goes up by the square of the voltage. Yeah. And there were lots of switch mode power supplies for computers available now. And it just turned out that 200 volt capacitors for a given storage density were much cheaper than 50 volt capacitors. And so we got that cost advantage thrown in as well. And transistors, again, there were plenty of high voltage transistors, higher voltage, lower current. So that wasn't an issue. And my brother designed the amplifier circuitry.
Of course he did.
Of course he did.
What else would Owen do? I mean, come on. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So besides saving money, and I mean, because I remember the Overture speakers as being pretty affordable. I mean,
yes.
I mean, I only heard. Trying to think which models they were. I heard it was a small floor stander. I can't remember what the model was, but they were. And I apologize. I wasn't the biggest Infinity fan back in the mid '90s. I knew Arnie Nudell and I knew John Ulrich, and I was fortunate enough to be allowed to do John Ulrich's piece in the Absolute Sounds book where we talked about those guys. But at that point, Infinity, under that umbrella, and when you were there, was a little bit different company. And they were more, I mean, to me, they were more about, they were very well received. It was a good company. I'm not knocking them at all.
Yeah.
But they were more about, I would say, more about performance at a price. They were more price driven than.
So there's at least 2 different Infinities. The old Infinity, higher end, but they also did very affordable speakers, and they're always playing with different cone materials, different concepts.
Sure.
Arnie and Kerry
polypropylene. They were one of the first guys to use polypropylene.
Yeah, and when we joined, Arnie had already left, because they were purchased by Harman.
Yeah.
And Perry was still there, but kind of only to transition, so he was on his way out. And we, just like it happened at Kev, we were the interlopers coming in, owned by a new company, to say you're going to do things different. So I get that. I'd already been through it, so I would try to be as sensitive as I could.
Well, yeah, but you and Laurie were like, what you guys brought to the table was completely different.
Completely different.
Thank God. I'm sorry you left Kef, because I mean Kef was foundering, no question.
Yeah.
But I look at Kef as one of the companies that changed high fidelity. I mean, they completely changed what a speaker should be, could be, and what the potential was to do with a designed loudspeaker from the ground up. I thought Infinity was like that when they started.
Yeah.
The era when you were there, I admit that I didn't know in the mid-'90s that you and Laurie were there. Mm-hmm. And I was less impressed because Infinity knocked me. I mean, dude, the beta references, holy Christ. But in the mid-'90s, what I remember of those speakers was amazing really good performance for not a whole it wasn't terribly expensive. I mean, some of the speakers that were being offered from Infinity in the mid-'90s, when I was working, well, I won't mention the store's name, but I remember a rep coming in trying to sell me the Infinity line and saying, but I have energy and I have paradigm and I have, why would I take on this line? And he brought me a few speakers that made me go, all right, yeah, okay, that's fine. And it was 90, it was probably 95.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they could have been my early, because I was doing affordable speakers as well.
Yeah,
reference 1, reference 2, etc.
Yeah.
So certainly Harman had forcing Infinity to go in different directions, which caused a lot of resentment. And then us coming in, these transitions are always difficult.
Yeah.
And there's always changes in management, in big companies, and so although I enjoyed all the design work, ultimately being in a big organization like that didn't really, well, I should say, didn't suit me. So I go to an even bigger organization after that.
Well, but the research design side of that we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, so I always enjoy that kind of thing. In fact, at one point I was talking to one of the marketing guys for Infinity, and I said, I come up with a new slogan for you. And they go, oh my God. That? And I go, Infinity? It's beyond me.
Oh, man, I'm sure that went over like a lead balloon.
Yeah, for some reason he didn't want to use that one.
Yeah.
My other were a bit less silly, well, maybe more silly. Infinity, reach for the stores.
Now, see, Andrew, I thought I was bad when I said Bose better sales through marketing instead of better sound through research. But
anyway, so we designed some interesting stuff.
They were interesting speakers. They were.
But ultimately,
and I think you guys at that point, I don't know. I'm trying to remember 94, 95-ish. I don't think anybody else was building speakers that were self-amplified.
No, when we launched
I don't think anybody else was doing that.
Prelude. No, the next one to do it was
might have been Definitive Technology.
Definitive, yes. But we'd already done it. It was Sandy Gross. Yes, Sandy Gross, yes. But we beat him to the punch with the.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sandy. So it's always interesting. I've got great relationships with lots of different speaker guys because
I can imagine
we all have fun. We've all got our different ideas of what we want to do. So why let the other guys who are trying to sell the stuff worry about competition. We'll just have a fun time when we all get together. Yeah. So Infinity lasted about 2.5, just under 3 years, I think.
You were out of there by 97-ish?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
And now, I understand why you moved to Pioneer. What some of the Japanese companies were doing in terms of research in terms of just like exploring and pushing limits. I don't know if Pioneer was alone, but I know that some of the Japanese companies back then their budgets for research were astronomical by most business standards. And when you went to Pioneer, it was what, 97-ish?
97. So one of the guys, Mitch Whitten, who used to be at Infinity in marketing,
Okay.
He moved to Pioneer, and then Pioneer made speakers. So
they made a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and they had their sales department in Long Beach. They had 2 factories out in the Pomona region, one of which was making all the rear projection TVs, and the other was making speakers and stuff, and the cabinets for the rear projection TV. So they had one of the best woodworking facilities in the whole of California.
I hadn't realized that.
Yeah, and they had a speaker design department.
I knew that.
Managed by one of the Japanese guys. They had a fantastic anechoic chamber, but they were looking to expand and do something different and better, because they were making all these big rack system speakers that were popular in those days, and not very good. Typical.
No, they weren't very good, but
the kind of speakers that you'd understand why people would say, why would you go work for a Japanese company? But as you were alluding to, with my background in research, I knew what the Japanese companies were capable of doing. The amount of fundamental research.
Luxman was doing it.
Luxman, Daihatsu, Onkyo, Yamaha.
Onkyo was amazing in its time. Denon.
They all had amazing research and materials technologies that we could only dream about over here. It's just that what they did with it was not necessarily what we liked, right?
Yeah.
Certainly in those days, you'd got the British sound, the East Coast sound, the West Coast sound, the French sound, the German sound, Japanese sound, all these different sounds, sort of.
No, the Japanese sound didn't really exist. It was kind of, I'm sorry. The British sound at the time was defined initially by KEF, then by B&W. The Japanese sound? More electronics than speakers, brother. Sorry.
That's because they weren't. Nobody really considered them. Right. There was nobody
speakers
of quality price up. They were, but they weren't bringing them over here.
Okay. Well,
and I'll get back. I'll get into that a bit later on in the talk. So I knew what research capabilities he got. So Mitch was asked, we want to bring in someone to head up speaker design.
Right.
Do you have any suggestions? He goes, Andrew. That was it. One suggestion. So I interviewed and I got the job. So now I'm going to head up speaker development. There's still a Japanese guy above me, as there always is in these.
It's a Japanese company. That's always how they work. Yeah.
Right. But he's a speaker engineer in his past. So
That was kind of ambiguous in his past. Okay.
Well, because he's a manager.
I'm just saying. Right? That was kind of ambiguous.
I remember at one point we got a new head of the whole of Pioneer Americas, and he came to tour, and I knew some of his history. I'd seen, he's actually listed his resume that he'd shown all of us, and I don't know if anyone else noticed in this meeting, but we got all the managers of all the departments here, of the Pomona facility, and I see that he was listed speaker engineer, but for about a year in his resume. And so he opens it up to questions, is there anything that you'd like to know? And I didn't mean it to come out this way, but basically I said, I see you only lasted a year as a speaker engineer. What happened? And the room falls silent.
Imagine that.
And he understood and said something back to me that was almost just as facetious in a funny way.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's how it's going to work. And for the rest of the presentation, he keeps doing these things to me, making snarky remarks, and it just formed a really fantastic.
Well, you had to love that. You had to respect that, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
anyway,
he was an engineer, yes? I mean,
but he
he
was an
was
engineer,
actually an
yeah.
acoustic engineer.
Yes, but he decided
Right.
to move on through the ranks and end up being president, right? So
Paid a lot more than being an engineer, I'm sure.
he does.
Yeah.
So
President, yeah.
so I joined this this department, and basically I'm told I have a blank sheet of paper, and
That's a scary thing to me.
it was a totally scary thing
Dude,
because
I mean,
what do you do? Sorry, my phone's ringing. Let me just cancel that.
hopefully it's not the missus.
It is.
Oh, shit, dude. Sorry. Tell her I apologize.
I've got this blank sheet of paper,
Dude,
and
it's scary as hell.
it's scary and exciting.
Well, yeah, it's
because
exciting, but it's scary as hell.
I've got to scary. I've got to come up with ideas, but I can come up with ideas. I can be different, and so
That wasn't the TFZ-700, was it?
TZ-F700. That's what I started.
I had a pair. Andrew, I sold. I'll bet it was. I guess it wasn't really a lot, but I probably sold 7 pair of those. And I mentioned to you on our phone call the other night that it wasn't Family Guys, because the Family Guy was like, she says I can't put that ugly thing in my room, but it was to guys like me who could hear that went, damn, this thing's cool. And that tweeter, brother, I'm sorry, that tweeter was unique. That Iris tweeter was, oh shit, you got parts there, don't you? Yeah, yeah. Look, so the store that I managed at the time, so my arc was very different. I had a company. I was managing a single store, not a chain of 97 or 150, whatever. I was managing a single store, mom and pop store in Rockford, Illinois. And we had a theater. It was an upstairs, like you walked in the door and there was this curved stairway that went up, and you didn't get invited up there unless you had dough. But we took you up there, and those speakers were in the front. And we'd sit people down, and you push the button, and the projector came out of the ceiling, and the screen opened, the curtains opened up, and dude, I sold. I mean, those things. How much were they then? I don't remember. Were like?
I think 3,000 a pair. I think.
I was going to say they were like 3,500. I don't remember.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But there was something about them that was. I mean, and to be absolutely honest with you, most of the people that bought them as much on the appearance as on the sonic results. Because, dude, they were. There's a picture showing on the screen right now, but they were so cool. I never bought a pair because I couldn't afford them actually at the time. I'm thinking at the time I had Acoustat 2+2s. But
I still have a pair of 1+1s.
Oh yeah, well the 2+2s. Oh my god! But I bet I sold 7 pair in a year, which I don't know how. Did Pioneer do well with that speaker? I don't know. I just know that we thought they were fabulous.
Yeah, reasonably well. It's always the problem, like I said, why, when I announced I was joining Pioneer, people going, why with your background are you joining a Japanese speaker company?
Have you seen the research they're doing?
Because, have you seen the research they're doing?
Yeah.
And I was always telling people, as soon as possible, I want to go over to Japan, and you leave me alone to wander around the engineering department and go, ooh.
Dude, I can see that in you. I can see that in you.
I actually did that, and although not alone, they didn't trust me that much at that early on.
Was that in '94 or was it a little bit later?
That was in '97. I joined them. And 83 to 94, 94 to, yeah, 97.
97.
So,
okay.
Started on that speaker, and that I was going to do powered bass, so it's
Yeah.
12-inch down-firing woofer. Then I wanted to do this concentric driver, and I came up with an idea for how to solve all the diffraction problems that a concentric driver has, particularly because if the cone's got to move, it needs a roll surround at the edge, which messes up the radiation.
Right.
And what this does, I thought about headphone drivers. This is the mid-range cone, and you can see it flexes, it moves back and forth. So the voice coil's around there. The edge doesn't move. The whole cone just flexes to move. So it's always got a smooth profile. And that was put into a ball, and then that was stuck on top of the bass cabinet with a 6-inch mid-bass driver behind it, which sound diffracted around.
That, of course, Iris was the right name. What did Iris stand for? What was the...
So this was interesting because it was Alan Boothroyd I brought in to do the industrial design. Because I'd worked with him at KEF. And so he came up with that concept of the elliptical cross-section cabinet with the round base on it and the slant cut-off to put the ball on top. Because I gave him the task. How do you put a ball on top of a cabinet and make it look good?
And make it look good,
Yeah. So we kept calling it the eyeball.
There's a picture here.
And then I thought, eyeball. You always want to name your children.
Exactly what it looked like, Andrew. It did. Right. I mean, it looked like... Yeah.
And because we'd got those creases in that makes it look like an iris, I thought, well, iris would be a good name for it.
What the hell does it mean?
It's got to mean something.
Yeah.
So I said to Alan, I'm going to go home and get the dictionary. So I literally got...
Lori that came up with it, was it?
No, because I'm now at Pioneer. Lawyer's at THX.
Okay.
He left Infinity to go to THX.
Okay.
I left to go to Pioneer. So this is down to me now. I haven't got the safety net now.
You did some research.
So I opened up the dictionary, started looking through all the I words and the R words and the S words, and I came up with ISO radiant imaging system.
That's what it was.
That's what it was. Cool. So ISO meaning 1 again, and radiant because it's a concentric driver and it improves imaging. So it was going to be ISO radiant imaging speaker, but you can't say the Iris speaker because it means ISO radiant imaging speaker. Yeah. just like the CES show.
The Consumer Electronics Show.
Yeah.
And just for grins, okay, folks, I'm going to tell you, this was a really good speaker. Andrew, I mean, it was, but I mean, this was a really good loudspeaker. It was coherent as hell. The thing that amazed me was, so this is a guy who was listening to Acoustat 2+2s. Can you talk about coherence? Yes. Below 42 hertz, we had a subwoofer. But as far as coherence, it was fabulous. And this speaker, at the time, this was 95 or 6?
It would have been, started in 94, so it launched probably late 94, early 95.
All right. Well, I think it was 96 or 7 that I was actually selling these. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong. I don't know. But what amazed me about them was they were so damn coherent. I mean, they integrated so well, Andrew. This was a great design. You may not have heard this from anyone else, but I'm telling you, that was a really amazing loudspeaker.
What was interesting about developing it, I'd started all the research for this, and I'd also started some affordable speakers for Pioneer.
We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Oh, I also missed an important speaker that I did with Infinity, but maybe I'll go back to that. But
if it was important, Andrew, I want to talk about it.
Okay.
I'm serious. I mean, if it mattered to you, I want to talk about it.
Right. So basically, I'm new to Pioneer. I've been employed because I got a reputation, but I'm still new,
Serious reputation.
and I'm starting this totally new concept that's got to involve lots of tooling to put it all together. So it's an expensive development process. So I had to be vetted.
Are you serious?
Yes. They sent over Dr. Yamamoto. Now, Dr. Yamamoto was the chief technical person in the whole of the Pioneer Sound division, and he was on the DVD audio committee, the international committee for doing DVD audio.
Wow.
He'd written the standard textbook on acoustics that every Japanese engineer reads at university. So he was sent over to interview me. And so, yeah, I was sort of a bit nervous, but I was asking my guys, well, so what happens here? And they said, you need to put together a presentation and then present it to Dr. Yamamoto, and he'll ask some questions. And what I didn't realize, every manager from this whole factory was going to be in this presentation, because this is a great honor that Dr. Yamamoto is coming out. So
it had to be
the president and the vice president and my boss and everybody else's boss, and everyone's in there.
That had to be intimidating.
Yeah, so I start this thing, and he keeps interrupting.
I'm Andrew Jones.
I mean, interrupting in the way of, not in a bad way, but, pausing me to ask questions. And I'd asked, how long is this going to take? And I was told, present for about 50 minutes, and then there'll be some questions, and then that's it. This went on for 3 hours.
Oh my God.
And it was question after question. And I knew that some of the questions would be about certain parts that I hadn't yet finished yet. But I knew that I would probably get asked about it, and I knew what I would
some idea of what to answer.
Well, this is what I will do to answer those questions.
Sure.
And so 3 hours, it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And when we finally finished and walked out, my boss goes, very entertaining, like tennis. Because the only two people talking for 3 hours, and I can do it just by myself.
Andrew, you can go for weeks. I know you can.
But there's myself and Dr. Yamamoto. And so it goes very well. Then we go out for dinner, and it's at a very fancy Japanese restaurant. And I'm a guy who doesn't eat
Japanese food.
Yeah. So but I kind of got to, because I'm at this fancy restaurant. Anyway, I muddle my way through it, but we start talking, and I say to him, basically, well, you know all about me, but basically my bluntness, just like that thing, what have you done? Kind of.
I love it. I love it, Andrew.
So I find that he worked at NHK. So it's NHK research division.
Wow. Yeah.
So basically the equivalent of BBC research that came up with the LS35A and that. So he was sort of their equivalent over there. And not only that, while he was working there, he developed the moving coil cartridge that got licensed to Denon. So he developed it for NHK.
The 103?
Licensed Denon to manufacture it for the NHK, which was the Denon 103.
103, yeah.
So he was, and a short while later.
Credentials. He was for real.
He sent me the NHK research report that he'd produced while at NHK about the development of that cartridge. So we became fast friends for the rest of the time. So,
well, thank God for that. I mean,
yeah. And then, I'd got Japanese engineers in the department with me working on this project, and so it was the group in Tokyo who did the physical development work of this driver that I showed you, and so I would go over there and work with them on optimizing it. And so then I got this great relationship with all the guys in Tokyo. They got, and at one point, like I said, I said, show me around everything you've got in all these storage rooms. So Nagatani-san, who became my best friend, we're walking around, And I see this speaker, which I recognize, and I go, oh, that's one of my Infinity speakers.
Really?
And he said, yeah. And he said, no, it isn't. And I said, yeah, no, that's my Infinity speaker. He said, no, it isn't. I said, but
Yes, it is.
those are my moldings. We tooled that up. And he goes, I know, but take a closer look. And I looked, and there was a different logo on the speaker. And it turned out the factory had been, they slapped a different logo and selling them out the back door.
Doesn't mean anything.
So that was fun. But, I got embedded with Tokyo, flying out there all the time to work in the labs there. We got our own anechoic chamber, a fantastic anechoic chamber in Pomona, and it ultimately became my chamber because I was the only one actually doing that work.
We know that Technical Audio Devices was. I mean, at that time, it was just pro sound, right? I mean, it was when you got there, it was all pro sound. It's how you hear sound at a concert, at a venue. Well, actually, the first time I think I saw you doing TAD was at Alexis Park.
Yes.
Before we moved to the Venetian, when the first time you showed me, showed us, not me, the crowd. Here's the TAD philosophy. We're going to build these things. We're going to take all these individual sections, put them together, and stack them up. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. Was it the R1 or the RS one?
The model one.
Model one. Yeah,
right,
dude. So, I mean, I'm going to say it was. Well, at the time, it was kind of expensive. It was about $40,000 or $45,000, wasn't it?
$45,000.
Yeah.
So what happened with that was that as our factory was developing speakers in the US, with the Corporation of Japanese Engineering, so we wanted to do something a bit more expensive, $4,000 or $5,000, sort of, expensive for a Pioneer branded speaker.
Oh, for Pioneer, yeah.
So we were talking, the engineering group in the factory as opposed to the marketing group, and we're saying, well, we don't really want it to be necessarily Pioneer because Pioneer is still considered, a lower brand, right? But we've got Pioneer Elite brand, which definitely
was a really good product.
Right. So why don't we do something under the Elite brand? Well, we as the factory people didn't own the Elite brand. That was marketing and sales.
Right.
And they weren't agreeable to this because they didn't think they could necessarily sell a $4,000 or $5,000 speaker even under Pioneer Elite.
That's surprising.
So they said no. So what are we going to do now? So I knew of TAD because
I had not heard of them until you got there, buddy. I mean, I knew Pioneer. I knew Pioneer Elite. I'm a big fan of some of the Pioneer Elite gear. I had not heard of TAD until you arrived and started doing some stuff.
So back in '78, Pioneer had been researching at that time a new material, beryllium.
Oh my God.
So if you remember the Yamaha NS1000, that was the first domestic speaker to use beryllium. A beryllium dome mid-range and a beryllium dome tweeter.
Yeah.
Using a process called vapor deposition.
Yep.
And both Yamaha and Pioneer were working on this technology. So Pioneer decided that they were going to work on something for the pro audio market, and they hired Bart LeCanthe, who was the L from JBL. JBL. Or
that was low.
So that not the L. He was the guy. He was a designer. Let's say he's an engineer working at JBL, and done a lot of designs for JBL in the pro side. So they hired him to start developing some pro speakers, and particularly a compression driver for Pioneer. But they realized that they could develop a diaphragm for the compression driver from beryllium, which had never been done.
Wow.
And they started doing this design work and realized just how amazing this thing was. Because it's a 4-inch diaphragm, first breakup mode above 20K.
I was going to say, it was up
4-inch
there, wasn't it?
compression. Nothing else could touch it. Hugely expensive, but they developed this. And it turned out to be so good, they thought, we can't sell this into the studios as Pioneer. Usual story.
Yeah.
So they came up with Technical Audio Devices, TAD, as a brand, and launched that and some bass drivers into the pro market. And it was sort of, I don't know monetary-wise, but it was a huge success. It became recognizable as one of the professional monitoring systems available, spec'd into all sorts of studios. So I knew of that work, and I knew what it had taken to develop that compression driver. So I sort of said, well, why don't we design a speaker and call it TAD?
Yeah.
So for TAD for the home. Well, the response, you can't just take TAD. And so they sent the contingent of people from Japan to come over to the States and discuss this concept and try and discover what is the current reputation of TAD.
The acceptance, yeah.
Right, the acceptance. So we toured all the studios around Hollywood. We went to Capitol Records. Got a tour of Capitol Records and talked to the engineers there.
Now, when was this, Andrew?
2000.
Okay.
And we toured. We talked to Bouton studio designers. We went to the record plant and all these places and asked questions about TAD. And I remember in particularly one discussion, I said, they were saying how good TAD was. It's the best. And I said, okay, when you say the best, I mean, come on. In the hi-fi world, if you say what's the best speaker, we'll give you a range of options. Is that what you mean? And they said, no. TAD is the best, then the other options are the rung below that. Oh, wow. So when we came back from all these meetings, the consensus was, if we're going to do TAD home, it can't be a $5,000 speaker. It has to be a flagship, because TAD Pro is a flagship. So we're going to design a flagship.
Wow.
Now I've got to do a flagship, cost no object speaker.
Yeah.
I mean, yay and oh shit. Right?
Yeah.
And so we decided this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, but the Model 1 was pretty damn impressive.
Well, it was. So what they then said, we'll put together a team.
How long did it take you to build that thing?
3 years. So they said, you're going to head up the team, and you're going to have responsibility for the decisions. If there's any disagreements between US and Japan, it's you that makes that decision.
Wow.
Pressure.
That's odd from Japan, buddy. I'm sorry.
It's very odd.
That's odd from Japan.
Yes. So we start this process, and I'm going, okay, well, it obviously has to have beryllium. And my first thought was, let's do a line array, so 8 foot high. Let's just take lots of those 4-inch diaphragms as mid-rangers.
Right.
And then they also had the only ever beryllium ribbon tweeter.
Wow. I didn't know they had a ribbon.
Yeah. I actually found just yesterday I've got some spare ribbons, and they're amazing looking things. So I thought, why don't we do a line array of fit as many 4-inch diaphragms, within 8 foot, and ribbon tweeters. Then I found out the cost. The cost to me of those diaphragm coil assemblies was going to be $400 each. And I forget what it was going to be for the ribbons. This even parts cost was going to be, in the $100,000.
Yeah.
It was just not going to happen. So I thought, okay, well, what else can we do? And then, well, I'm known for concentric drivers.
Yes, you are.
Why don't we do a beryllium concentric driver, a beryllium tweeter, and a beryllium cone? What is the biggest thing you can manufacture in that vapor deposition process? And they gave me the maximum, because I was thinking, well, the dome part of that beryllium is 4-inch, and I know that some of those beryllium drivers have a beryllium surround on it, so you can go at least to 5-inch diameter.
Beryllium surround too? I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
On top of that, if you take a 6-inch mid-range driver, let's say, the diameter of the cone itself is 5 inches. So I'm thinking we could do effectively a 6-inch concentric driver, all beryllium, and that has never been done before.
Yeah.
So that was it. That was the decision. We're going to start with that. So that took a lot of development work, tooling it up and trying it, and then retooling it and trying it. But we got that developed, and so I brought in Boothroyd again.
Okay.
And I said, okay, you have a sort of similar task as before. I'm going to do this concentric thing. I'm going to put it in some kind of head, and then your job is how do we integrate that to a cabinet without screwing up the acoustic performance. So every sketch he would come up with, we'd make a head, I'd take it into the anechoic chamber, measure it on its own, and then bring a cabinet closer and closer and closer and see how much it perturbed it and give him the rules for what we could do. And then we visited Japan and we're looking at everything, and we noticed that every speaker stand and every amplifier has been put on a wooden block that is laminated birch ply stained. They'll be about 2 or 3 inches thick, and so they're always stood on this mass loading base, which is made from layered birch ply. And he said, that would be a cool look for the cabinet. Could we build the cabinet by layering it like that?
Oh my God.
Ooh. And
well, I remember seeing the demo at CES, whatever CES it was, where you showed, all the separate slices layered on top of each other.
Yeah.
When the hell was that? CES?
Has to be, it's either, I'm guessing 2003 or 2004.
I was going to say 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I was going to say 4, but 4. Yeah. And it was still at the Alexis Park.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is my first time doing high end, but what a way to launch it with. And we developed all the drivers, sandwich cones with carbon fiber and 4-inch diameter voice coils, and they're 1/2 inch long in an 1.5 inch long magnet gap. So they're underhung, they're huge things in this 52 layers of 3/4 inch ply, finished to a high gloss finish. It was a masterpiece, let's say.
Well,
it was certainly.
It was. Look, I remember hearing it. I came into that Alexis Park room when you were demonstrating them, and I was like, so. Just to back up a bit, I first met you in 1999 when you were with Pioneer. It was in the Washington D.C. area. You were doing the Pioneer training thing for it was a retail presentation, and I couldn't believe it because, dude, when I walked in, I was like, okay, I'm going to this Pioneer training thing, and I'm like, son of a gun, this isn't some schlub that they just sent. This is the guy who did all this shit. I'm sure you don't remember me, and that's fine. But I remember it was just after the Columbine shooting that it was that summer, and it was at DC, and you had I think they were about $199 a pair, and you were doing the isolation
Pioneer ISO drive.
Yeah. And I was like,
you want to see one?
You have one there?
I have one there. Hold on.
Oh, of course you do.
Of course. Now, this
is one of the elite models, right?
This is a special version. I don't actually ever remember whether this went into production.
Yeah.
But this is...
That's an elite.
That's the elite version.
Yep.
So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Now, do you remember what those sold for?
Well, the non-elite version, regular, yeah, $199 a pair.
Yeah.
So it's another example of doing really affordable speakers. I've always had a knack for.
You have, sir. You have.
So with the TAD, I remember setting up for that Alexis Park show. I'd been out there a couple of months early to look at the room, and I'd measured it carefully to make sure we'd got enough length of cables, and I get there and I'd made a mistake and the cables aren't long enough for where I need to put everything. And they were so long, nobody had got long enough cables. So I'm mechanical engineer Brett Frank and myself, who I'd brought with me from Infinity. I'd met him at Infinity. I go out to Best Buy and we buy a couple of reels of cable, just regular speaker wire, 2-core cable. And
what, like 18.2 or I mean, what are you talking about?
Yeah, something like that. And I say, well, we can't just use it like this. We got to make it look better and fatter. Why don't we braid them? We'll take 3 strands together. So we spent a couple of hours,
we'll twist them.
tied it to a table leg, and then we're just braiding 3 sets of these wires until we get them long enough. And mine looked much neater than Brett's.
Of course they did.
So we use these throughout the show. Everyone's like, what speaker cables are those? Where did you get those? Oh, the custom speaker.
Of course they're custom.
Anyway, so that was our launch of TAD. And John Stronza from Bel Canto.
Pretty damn impressive, by the way. I was there.
Yeah, it's when I met John Stronza from Bel Canto. And he'd seen this sign saying TAD. And he's thinking, what on earth is TAD doing at a hi-fi show? And he walked in and he goes, those are not any TAD speakers I recognize.
Yeah.
But he was blown away and became good friends after that. So, yeah, that was an amazing experience. And
I
launched TAD into the home.
Oh, to be honest with you, buddy, I don't remember that it was beryllium. I don't remember that part. What I remember was the intense effort that was put into the cabinetry. The layer upon layer upon layer. And I mean, I'd have to go back to look at my CES show report, but you made it that year because it was a pretty damn impressive sounding room. Now, TAD hadn't started building amplifiers yet.
No.
Oh.
So, always been purely a speaker company. So we did that, the Model 1. But that cabinet was a nightmare to manufacture, in particular because of having the high gloss resin coating on it.
Yeah.
So eventually we moved away from that way of building the cabinet to a more conventional, but having that as a yardstick, we knew that if we build something else, it's got to be audibly just as good. So we then developed the reference one, and that became still selling today in a Mark.
Sure.
Maybe the Mark III version now. It went Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3. Did the compact reference, which was my
yeah. I
CR1.
think I first heard the CR1. What, like CES 2008?
Could be, yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Dude, that was a stunning little speaker.
Still my favorite. Yeah.
Stunning little speaker. It was that the same year that I'm pretty sure it was CES 2008 that you had a prototypical TAD amplifier. That
yes,
I mean,
that was
weren't named yet. They were
weren't
still
named.
Yeah. Those ended up being what, the M600s, I think.
M600s. So what happened with that is that it's an interesting story. Brilliant electronic designers within Pioneer as well. So we decided we should, as well as the speakers for TAD, do TAD electronics. And it was going to be a CD player and power amplifiers.
I do remember the amps.
And in the development of the amplifier, they'd got this concept for building it on a cast iron chassis as a mechanical grounding thing. And they started the development of it. And they brought me over to listen to it. and it was, yeah, I mean, great. I mean, looked gorgeous, great thing, but this isn't the sound I'm used to. You know, the position we got ourselves into with TAD, I got the pick of anyone's associated equipment. You know, if I go to someone and say, can I use your amplifiers or your preamp or whatever? Oh, yes, please do. So I could build a superb sound. And I said, my role at a show is, yes, I design the speakers, you know, with a lot of help. So
Yeah.
it's a we thing.
Yeah. Well, you're
but-
using some really good tape decks and some great electronics to show off the speakers. I mean,
Yeah, I helped launch the tape.
I'll probably put up some pictures from the CES shows that I went to
Yeah.
where you were doing these demos.
I helped with the launch of the tape project. I said,
Yeah,
feel
that's
free
right.
to use
Yeah.
my room, Paul
Yeah.
Stubblebine. And so they'd bring in the tape machines for me. So I would do anything to get a good sound at the show. And if
Yeah.
from year to year the speaker is the same, my job is to do better next year by the associated equipment or the setup of the room and
Right.
finding the music and all this kind of stuff. So I said to them, it was the year, yeah, it was coincidental with the year we were going to launch the prototype of the compact reference.
2008.
2008. So I said that this sound of these amplifiers is not good enough. It's a step backwards from what I'm able to use in the main system.
How did they make that?
Well, so I said,
I mean, they took it to heart because
they did. So what I said to them is, and they were still trying to get me to use it because they wanted to be able to demonstrate it.
Sure.
So I said, okay, here's the deal. I said, I have the main room and there's also the second room. And we never have used that as a demo room before because it's not the best room.
Sure.
But here's the deal. Since I'm going to be launching a prototype speaker, I can launch a prototype amplifier with it. And by running those two together, they can't hear that amplifier on a known speaker, the reference one.
And they can hear a known speaker with an amplifier.
Right, the compact reference, which no one's heard before, sort of sounds so surprising for what it is.
It really
that it will still sound really good on that amplifier. Because I don't want to say, this is a prototype amplifier, it's a work in progress, it'll get better. Because first impressions kind of fix people's idea of what it's going to be.
Sure. Yeah.
But I said, you won't know if the sound of this combination still sounds remarkable. They won't be able to pin anything down to the amplifier.
Can't determine which one is which. Yeah.
Right, and it's in a different room, so everything's different. If I can get that working in that room adequately, that's how I'll demonstrate it. And they accepted that.
It was adequate, by the way.
Yeah.
The CR1 was pretty damn impressive.
Yeah.
I have pictures. Well, they'll be up on the screen. So.
Right. So that's how we launched the CR1 and the M600. But it took them, I think it was more than 2 years.
I was going to say at least 2 years, because I think it's 2010 before the CR or the M600 became a reality.
They basically went back to scratch and chose a different amplifier topology. They just totally engineered it. And by the time they finished, it's just
it was a good amp.
Stunning amplifier.
Yeah.
And then even the CD player, it was going to be just a CD player. And I'm going, you can't do, you've got to give me a digital input because I'm doing all these high-res files. I was one of the first to start playing high-res files, you know, again, direct from the studios, Boss Gags and people like that. And so I said, if you're going to, a CD player's got a DAC in it, give me access to the DAC. And so that's what they did, and we launched that CD player, and then ultimately a preamplifier, and that reference series combination. I wish I could have afforded to have one, but you know that wasn't. The amplifiers were $63,000 a pair. The CD player was $40, and the preamplifier was $45.
I do not remember the line stage, Andrew. I admit it. I don't remember the line stage.
Just beautiful.
Yeah. But the amps I remember the full introduction to the official M600. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I suspect that was were you using the TAD preamp and DAC at that time? Because I don't remember them.
Yeah, they launched after the M600.
That makes sense.
And the preamp came out last.
That makes sense, because I don't remember either of them.
Right, but the preamp, this idea that, well, it should sound better without a preamp. Can't you just run the DAC straight into the amplifier?
Yeah.
But it just didn't seem like that. Once I put it was a magical sound combination with all of those.
Look, line stages. Look, I've heard some decent passive preamplifiers, transparency, resolution, but most of them are lacking the dynamics and the expressiveness, that power and that expressive bloom and body that, I mean, I really like preamps. I typically do. I've heard some really good passives, but as I said, they just seem to lack the dynamic capability that a really good line stage brings to music.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just me.
Right.
And I apologize. I don't remember that preamp. You said it was about 40 grand?
Yeah,
45 grand?
Yeah.
What was the model number, Andrew? I don't remember it.
C600, and the disc player was the D600.
Makes sense. The other ones were 600s. So C for control, D for yeah. Cool.
And M for
I'm gonna have to go look one up, buddy.
M for amplifier.
Well, that doesn't make sense, but yeah.
Monoblock.
Monoblock. There you go. Yeah. I don't remember the C600, and I mean, you were so taken with it. I'm gonna have to go see what I can find out on Audio Gun or.
Yeah, build quality, stunning. I remember when we first unboxed it at that show, and they hadn't yet moved the bed out of that demo room. So, maybe it was a year when I wasn't using that room, but someone unboxed it and put it on the bed. And I came into the room and I thought, who would do that just to plonk it down on the bed? But I went over and I'm starting to feel this thing and just
what it weighs.
How immaculate, and the weight of it, and the silky finish of the anodizing. And I go, maybe I'll just leave it on the bed and I'll cuddle with it.
That's funny.
So, remarkable engineering capabilities.
Oh yeah.
TAD, yeah.
So
stunning.
What precipitated the end of your time at TAD? What made you? I mean, this is what 2014-ish, 13-ish,
15.
Okay.
2015. Yeah.
Okay. So
late 2014.
How did this shift to where you went? Oh, I think I'll go to Germany and go to Eli.
Well, not literally go to Germany this time. I'm not going to move country again. So Pioneer, remarkable company.
Yeah.
Remarkable plasma TVs.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And just really amazing TVs. But that was the ruin of them. It was so expensive, and the market price dropped so quickly that they never recovered from it. The investment in research, building factories, and selling, it just, the money never worked out. It ruined them. And so they had to keep cutting back, bringing the banks in to run the company, and everything started to change. And they started to close divisions, bring as much back to Japan as they could. And so it just, the whole feel of it changed. And it was difficult to justify projects, because I was not just designing for TAD, I was designing for Pioneer at the same time.
Sure.
And the justification for starting any new project was outrageous. I remember we were proposing a lineup of some speakers or subwoofers that we wanted to develop. And the product planner, you have to do this. It's almost literally a 200-page document you fill out to start the project. And he filled it out, and after a few months, they came back and said, no, it's a document for each speaker, not the series. And it's just,
Oh my God.
so it kind of, and
That has to be bad.
it was disheartening. So
Yeah.
it wasn't so special as it was.
Yeah.
And so I got this opportunity came up to literally start something new. ELAC was a long established speaker
Oh
company,
yeah.
but
I mean, I
never,
remember the ELAC Miracord. I mean,
well,
everybody had one of those back in the day at some point.
back in the day. And in
Yeah.
fact, ELAC have had the patent for the moving magnet cartridge and licensed, both manufactured for Shure and licensed to Shure
Wow.
in those early days. And then they were the third largest turntable manufacturer in the world,
Yeah.
and behind Garrard and Dual, and great presence in the States with the Benjamin Miracord turntables.
Yeah.
But once CD came along, they lost that.
Yeah.
And they switched to doing speakers, but never really made it over here with speakers.
Not in the
And
States, no.
not in the States. So I
They
knew
are
of
well
them.
respected in Germany.
They were, and
Yeah.
in Europe and Asia, very well respected. And I
Oh,
remember,
I didn't know about the Asia market.
yeah, and I remember seeing them at CES every year. They had the big corner demo room, and obviously they had the folder-driven tweeter, the AMT type tweeter.
Is that the
But they
Jet?
also, the Jet, they
Yeah.
call it the Jet, and I'd see their speakers. Never got much of a chance to listen, but I knew of their presence and I knew
Yeah.
what they'd done with this cool-looking bass driver. So I, myself and a couple of the other guys at Pioneer, we were approached with the idea of setting up a US division.
So
Of
they
them.
came to you? I mean, they reached out to you?
Yeah, the owners came to me, the owners of the
Interesting.
company.
It's got to be cool to be Andrew Jones and have people come to you. I mean, it's got to be cool. It's got to be very cool, buddy. So this was 2015 or 14? What did you say?
So this was happening in 2014.
14. Okay.
And we were approached to the idea of starting something new. Do we want to leave Pioneer and start something new? But they owned ELAC, so they said, well, we want to expand ELAC and grow ELAC. How about setting up
the opportunity to start ELAC America? Yes.
Start ELAC America and have initially 2 teams. Since they've never cracked this market, but we know this market, why don't we design some product for this market that is available to their market as well? And then as we grow recognition, we can then kind of cross together and market each other's products. So that was it. Let's start from scratch. And it came fresh off of doing that, the affordable bookshelf, affordable speaker range from Pioneer.
Well, dude, I as much as I loved the $199 Pioneers, the 239 or 249 debuts. I mean, I remember at Exponent when you introduced them, I walked up to you and I said, look, I know you're not going to tell me, but how the hell do you get this kind of resolution from a speaker at $239 or $249 a pair? Because, Andrew, look, we can debate all kinds of things, but at $250, anybody can afford that product. Anybody can afford that speaker, okay? And it's certainly not my $225,000 flagship speakers, okay? But it's not embarrassing at all.
Right.
The speaker that anybody can go, yeah, these are my speakers. They're pretty good. Buddy, I literally was knocked out. As much as I thought you had knocked one out of the park in '99 with those Pioneers, what you did with ELAC under $250, dude, there's no planet can touch.
But the interesting thing was, one of the first speakers at Pioneer was that $199 Ice Drive speaker, right?
Yeah.
But I finished at Pioneer with the $129 speaker that started as a $99 speaker. and that's what reignited interest in affordable speakers.
Yeah.
So I've done the $45,000 and the $90,000 speakers and the $42,000 bookshelf speaker of all things.
Yeah.
The CR1.
The CR1.
What am I doing a $99 speaker for? And it actually started life at $89. And what was happening was that Pioneer got great relationship, obviously, with Best Buy. We sold all the electronics through Best Buy. Best Buy had tried to sell the EX speakers,
Yeah.
which were basically mini TADs. Same beryllium tweeter, magnesium mid-range. Basically, they would, if they were branded TAD, they would be our affordable TAD speakers. But
Sure,
Pioneer
sure.
wanted to branded only Pioneer, which
Sure.
was a mistake. But anyway, they came to us saying, we know your capabilities. We've got space for another line of speakers. We'd like you to design them. So Chris, my colleague there, said, well, let's examine what your price points are, if there's any gaps in those price points, and we'll fill those gaps rather than just doing another brand head-to-head with a price point you already have.
Right.
And so we identified this $89 price point as one of them. And so my task was now...
Dude, $89. What do you got, $10 in parts?
Right.
I mean, come on. $89
So,
retail? I mean,
this,
there's packaging, marketing. I mean, what do you got, $10 worth to work with?
so
Jesus.
at this point, I'd lost touch a bit with price of components, right? So I wasn't sure what I can incorporate into a speaker at this price point. So I said, okay, look, what I'm going to do is design what I wish I could have, and we'll price it out with the factory in China and see what it comes out as, and then I'll massage it. Well, surprisingly, we got very close to the price I wanted, including a curved-sided cabinet of all things. And so, and not kerf cut, but proper bent plywood side panels, or bent MDF. And so I was able to do a real 4-inch bass driver, 1-inch dome tweeter, something like a 6 or 7 element crossover, not just a capacitor on the tweeter. So a real speaker.
Yeah.
And it started at $89, but very quickly got readjusted to $99, and they were happy once they heard the sound of it.
Oh my God, $99. Oh my
But
God.
it became a go-to product because nobody cared before that what a $99 speaker sounded like.
Exactly.
And this sounded like a real speaker. So
it sounded like music is what it sounded like.
Yeah, and then did a Mark II version that went up to 129, but made it even better. So when we launched ELAC, we thought, well, Germany's already got mid-high-end product, and there's no point doing another one that's, well, they already have those and you're doing one, and how long is that going to take, and how many will we sell? And what Chris and I proposed was the idea that this Pioneer speaker has been so popular, people are always asking us, what's the next one up in the lineup? And we didn't have one. They wanted to spend more money, which is always a nice thing to hear. And so we thought, why don't we start there? Because we can capture more of an audience doing it that way, and quicker development time. So we started in February, mid-February, and what you heard was the June show in Los Angeles, and we had a prototype by that time, and we were shipping by October. A remarkable development time, but that was, let's do the double the price point, $229 it worked out as, and it was, ELAC.
It was magic for that price. I can't tell you. I mean, look, I'm very fortunate in that I get to live with, I don't know, $750,000 worth of gear. Not everybody has that option, and I'm grateful for it. I don't take it for granted. But the fact is,
no wonder you haven't retired yet.
Huh?
No wonder you haven't retired yet.
Dude, I still have to pay for these speakers. I have 6 months left on these speakers. Okay, 7 months actually. But and my wife, dude, I think I mentioned in the review, but they edited it. I said, my banker, I brought a permanent smile to my banker's face And my wife is like, "Are you out of your mind?" But I'm 7 months away from owning them. So, but buddy, what you do at price points that the average person can afford, and I mean, look, $250 is not a lot of money, okay? But what you can buy from ELAC right now, the debuts at that price, we can debate all day what they don't do right. But what we can't debate is how much they do correct. At that price point, there isn't a speaker out there that comes close. Nothing. I mean, I've heard speakers at $750 that don't do what your $250 debuts can do in terms of authenticity and in particular spatial recreation, imaging, and tonality. I don't expect you to tell me even if you chose to, but what you're doing at these price points today, I mean, I know the guy who designs these $325,000, $225,000 speakers thinks you're a genius because, well, you are. But to build the products that you build at that price, I can't tell you how many guys I work in a factory. I'm an IS manager in a factory, 140,000 square foot factory, and I have people come up to my office and hear my office stereo, and they're like, "Holy shit!" I'm like, "Yeah, well, it is about $7,000." And they're like, "Well, what should I get?" Go buy these. I don't know, man. I just think what you have learned, what you know, your ability. I mean, you've proven you can do it at all levels. I mean, $80,000 or $80. I don't know how you pull it off, sir, but we are so glad that you do. There are so many people out here who think that what you're doing really matters. And I cannot wait to get into the next episode where we talk about what's actually going on with ELAC. Andrew, again, thank you so very much.
I'll finish with one funny story about
please.
$80. So we're doing a Rocky Mountain show, and I mentioned I knew John Stronza from Bel Canto. And at this particular show, he was launching a more affordable range of amplification and CD.
He does all Class D amplifiers.
Yeah, and we were talking about the Pioneer speaker, because it's $129, and he said, that would have been perfect because it's so good for the price. Just put on the end of this lower cost system. And he said, "Do you have any with you?" And I said, "No, I didn't bring those to this show." And he said, "Any chance you could overnight some so I could use them?" I go, "John, it's going to cost more to overnight
them than they cost.
Just go and buy them."
Yeah.
He said, "Okay, let's go to Best Buy and buy some." So we walk into Best Buy and take off the shelves a box with my Pioneer speakers in them, and we put them on the counter, and we'd like to buy these, please. And the guy kind of looks at me because I've done lots of talks.
Do you know who you are?
Best Buy. And he goes, "Okay." So I hand him my credit card.
Oh my God.
And because my signature is all over the box, right? So I hand him the credit card, and he swipes it. And then as I'm signing the check, he goes, "Wait a minute, are you Andrew Jones?" Yeah. Can I ask why you're buying a pair of your own speakers at retail? "Oh, well, it's like this, you see."
That's funny. God. Oh, Andrew, thank you so very much for everything you do, and more importantly, for taking the time to share it with all these people who want to see what's going on with you. Really grateful, buddy. We're going to hang it up for today. I want to thank you for your time.
Yep.
Please be safe, and we'll talk again next time. We're going to do the whole ELAC thing, yes?
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Cheers, guys.
Take care.
What a great conversation. I simply don't have the words to express how grateful we should be that Andrew was able to find the time to share all this amazing loudspeaker history with us. In our next discussion, we will pick up from the time he joined ELAC and discuss all the remarkable efforts there from 2014 through today. With that, I'll ask you that, should you find any merit or value in the information I'm sharing here, please subscribe, like, and share links to your favorite episodes with your friends. And be sure to leave your comments or questions in the comments section of today's episode. Further, should you care to show your support for the channel, links for any number of options are also provided in today's description section. As always, thank you for taking the time to drop by and visit today. Please stay safe and be sure to keep the music playing. Till next week, cheers.